Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a dangerous severe weather event that'll be impacting the United States today, bringing the risk for significant damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes, and even potentially some extreme flash flooding. We'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this weather forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the Central Plains and as well as the northern plains, and we have a lot of showers and storms out there this morning. Notice the very prominent convection that's ongoing across Missouri. There's a lot of rainfall there. We have some showers and storms, and this is going to continue throughout the next several hours, and then we're going to see another area of storms develop later today across parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and perhaps even Texas. This will move off to the east, posing the threat for some fairly significant severe weather today, with damaging winds being the main concern, but also a few tornadoes, and we'll give you more of a detailed breakdown on that here in just a moment. Further off to the north, that is where a low pressure system is currently located. We're pointing this feature out to you because this could actually pose the risk for a couple tornadoes later today outside of the main tornadic region, because the main area that we're watching for at least a tornado risk will be back down here to the south, but over here we do have a chance for maybe an isolated tornado or two because of that low pressure system that'll create enough shear, and we might be able to see a couple tornadoes back up in parts of the western Midwest. So stay weather aware there, and then once we go into tomorrow, that low pressure system will move toward the east, and that'll eventually pose another threat for severe weather along the east coast and in the mid-Atlantic region. And then back down the southern plains, nothing new here. We have a heat dome that is dominating down here in parts of the southern United States, primarily along the Gulf Coast, and unfortunately this is not moving anytime soon. The relentless heat will continue across a very large chunk of the United States, meaning that those 100-degree temperatures that have been ongoing for several days now are not going anywhere. Now, the weather pattern across the United States recently has obviously been very active. We've had multiple days of severe weather across a very large chunk of the United States. I personally don't even remember when the last marginal threat or non-severe weather day was. We've had slight risks literally every day for the past month and a half. It's been so active, and that weather pattern is going to continue for the next several days, because right now we have a high pressure system again that's located back down near the Gulf Coast, and that's the heat dome that's keeping areas very hot in the southern tier of the United States. Meanwhile, we have another trough ejection out of Canada, and this is what's going to bring us severe weather today and tomorrow, and it's eventually going to continue to bring severe weather, perhaps even going into Tuesday. So it's going to be very active here across the United States. But let's go into Monday. Notice again that low pressure system moving to the east. This is a positively tilted trough, so usually these do not bring nearly as much of a severe weather outbreak as our negatively tilted troughs, which negatively tilted troughs are again more known for producing more shear and also have a more pull of moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico. So that's usually what we're seeing out of a negatively tilted trough. But since this is positively tilted, we are at least watching for some severe weather. It's just usually not on the most high scale that we can get. Once we get into Tuesday into Wednesday, notice that low pressure system weakens as it goes into New England. Then we have to watch back up in Canada again going into Wednesday into Thursday for another trough ejection. And once this one comes into the United States, this could also pose the threat of severe weather. So once we go into Thursday, notice this low pressure system dips into the Midwest. This is also where we'll have to be watching for some severe weather, perhaps on Wednesday or Thursday. And even before that, perhaps even on Wednesday, we could have a risk of severe weather back in parts of the northern plains and maybe the upper Midwest. So it's going to be very active this upcoming week. And eventually going to Friday, Saturday of next weekend, things do seem to be a little bit calmer by then, as we do have a heat dome that'll be dominating a large chunk of the United States by next weekend. That'll bring relentless heat to a large chunk of the United States. And then by next week, so very far out from now, things become a lot more uncertain. But as of right now, it does seem like we might get a break this upcoming weekend. But again, we desperately need a break across the United States. It's been very active over the past couple of months, and if you've seen severe weather, you can vouch for that. It's been very active across a large chunk of the country. All right, let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the upcoming days, and we're going to begin here with suspicious storm Sunday. As of right now, there is an enhanced risk of severe weather for southern Missouri, southeast Kansas, northern Arkansas, and northeast Oklahoma. Notice the marginal risk of severe weather. We are also watching for an isolated tornado risk in this entire region today, and that would primarily extend back up into parts of the western Midwest for Iowa and as well as southern Minnesota. But a very concerning area today. This is not overly typical for this time of the year either. We usually don't have severe weather risks this far down to the south in August, so a little bit uncommon here. But as of right now, the main concerns for today will be damaging winds. This will be more of a numerous threat, especially across that red shaded area where we are watching for some significant damaging winds, upwards of maybe 70 to 75 miles per hour. Also, the large hail concern, definitely a concern today, but it's not going to be our main concern. There will be at least some sporadic hail, upwards of about golf ball to maybe hen egg sized hail, so make sure you're staying weather aware. Protect your vehicle vehicles today, all that sort of stuff. Make sure you take the proper precautions. And then the tornado risk for today is going to be a little bit higher than we've had recently. There is a 5% probability within a 25-mile radius across parts of southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and southeast Kansas. Again, notice there is a low tornado potential going back up into parts of western and central Iowa and into southwest Minnesota. Again, there is enough shear for perhaps an isolated tornado, so make sure you have a tornado action plan in place if you're anywhere in that green shaded region for today. One of the things that you might forget about, but there is a threat for, is the flash flooding threat. Excessive rainfall, there's a moderate risk for that back down in southwest parts of Missouri, so make sure you're prepared for that threat today. And also the slight risk, you should definitely be prepared still for at least some isolated to maybe scattered flash flooding in those areas. Now let's talk more about the timing, and we'll begin with parts of the Midwest. Again, this is where there's a low-end chance for an isolated tornado, and this is where we'll be watching for is back over here in western Iowa as well as southwest parts of Minnesota. This is 4 o'clock this afternoon. Again, notice there's not really a whole lot of storm activity here, but there will be enough shear for perhaps an isolated tornado or two out of a couple of these storms over here. Again, this is around 5-6 o'clock this evening, so make sure you're staying weather aware this afternoon and evening. There is definitely a chance for an isolated tornado out of that band. Eventually going into the overnight hours, the severe weather threat will dwindle, but by tomorrow morning there might be a low-end chance for some storm activity that's severe in parts of the upper mid or central Midwest, so back near the Chicago suburbs. Damaging winds and maybe some isolated tornado risk might exist there, but again, the severe weather threat there is a bit lower as of right now. And then going back over in parts of the central plains, we are watching for a lot of severe weather today, or at least a lot of storms, I'll say. There will be some severe weather associated with these, so around 4 to 5 o'clock, notice the amount of storms that are already out there. We're gonna have a lot of different areas to watch for. There could be a discrete cell or two back down in parts of southern Missouri as well as northern Arkansas. Another area of storms that'll be back over in parts of northern Kansas, and another one that is going to be really developing a lot more in western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Eventually going into the evening hours, notice all the storms that we're watching for. There's a ton of areas to watch, but all this activity here will be mainly damaging winds and hail. There might be a brief tornado, but the threat of tornadoes are going to be much lower back over in this area. And eventually going into the late evening, so around 9-10 o'clock, these storms move to the east. And notice all the storm activity back over in Missouri. Missouri will be very active tonight and have that threat for some flash flooding. This is a closer look at Missouri tonight. We have to watch for 2 different rounds. The first round will be the discrete supercell potential. Out of those storms, there's a higher tornado risk. So if there's any discrete cells, those will have a better chance of producing a tornado. And then there'll be more of a cluster of storms that'll be back up to the north and west. As this pushes to the south and east, it will pose a threat for some damaging winds and hail. So stay weather aware this evening. I might go live for this event, so stay tuned. Click the bell icon down below so you're notified if and when we go live, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. By 10 to 11 o'clock, these storms will all start to cluster together. That'll limit the tornado threat after midnight, and overnight those storms move to the south and east with mainly a damaging wind threat. And then heading into Monday, there is a slight risk of severe weather back over in parts of the mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley. As of right now, the main concern is damaging winds, but there might be a couple of isolated brief tornadoes, but it's overall not too concerning of a threat for right now. This is what it looks like for timing. So tomorrow morning, a line of storms will be approaching Kentucky. That'll be our main concern right now, is damaging winds out of this event, and then maybe an isolated tornado embedded in that line of storms. By the afternoon and evening, there might be some more storm activity that fires off behind it. That could produce maybe an isolated tornado or two, but I'd say the threat is going to be overall lower. And then eventually going into the overnight hours, all these storms move off to the east, and it clears out pretty quickly. And then heading into tossing trampolines on Tacos Tuesday, we do currently have a slight risk of severe weather on the East Coast. And that's primarily for the remnants of what we're going to see tomorrow. That's going to be back over in the Ohio Valley and East Coast. And then going into wacky weather Wednesday, we have a slight risk of severe weather back up in parts of Minnesota. We'll give you more details on this in our next forecast. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.